Howdy everyone. Today I'm looking at a Canon lens that could be very nice, but has so far proved to be a little unpopular on the market. We have the EF 24mm f2.8 IS USM lens, designed to work with full frame or APS-C cameras. It's very small and neat, and it has a very nice, very wide angle of 24mm. On a full frame camera, that's about as wide angle as you can get before you start reaching ultra wide angle territory, and it gives you nice, slightly stretched corners. 24mm is really quite a dramatic, wide focal length, which I really like, but it tends to push your subject back a little bit. On an APS-C camera, the lens gives a 38mm field of view, which is a little more zoomed in, a classic standard focal length. Now, this modern 24mm f2.8 lens has a bigger 28mm brother, which is extremely similar in almost every way. Both lenses have a maximum aperture of f2.8. An aperture as wide as f2.8 lets in a reasonably good amount of light and can get you some slightly out of focus backgrounds, but certainly not as much as f1.8 or f1.4. which are the maximum apertures most people want to see in a prime lens. So it was quite a surprise to me and to other photographers that Canon developed these new little f2.8 prime lenses, which are really a bit of a dying breed. People normally want something with a wider aperture. Another issue is that this lens cost around £600 when it first came out, or $800 US, a truly ridiculous amount of money for what it is. It's come down in price now to about £450, but still that's pretty expensive. So ultimately, the unexciting maximum aperture of f2.8 and its completely unreasonable price meant that this lens and its 28mm brother have not really sold very well. Well, anyway, whether it's overpriced or not, I'm here to review it, so let's start by looking at its build quality. The lens is nice and small and very well built indeed. It's mostly made of plastic, but it's built around a metal lens mount, so it feels solid and secure on your camera. Its focus ring turns very smoothly and very precisely. It's a pleasure to use in manual focus. You can also turn that ring at any time, regardless of whether you're in autofocus mode. And the front element of the lens does not turn or extend when you change focus, which is an important feature if you're using certain filters. The lens's USM autofocus motor is extremely fast and very quiet indeed, as you can see here. However, if you're doing video work with autofocus, then you might just about hear it micro-adjusting in the background. It's hardly noisy though, not a huge problem. It works pretty well. A very nice feature of this lens is image stabilization. Here's some footage with it turned off and now turned on. The image isn't perfectly still, but the stabilization is certainly helping a lot, and it will help you to get sharper still pictures and nicer video. Overall, this lens is small and very nicely made indeed, working fantastically well. It's a joy to use on your camera, good for traveling with. Let's look at image quality, starting on a full frame camera, a 20MP Canon 6D. I've turned on chromatic aberration correction and peripheral illumination for this test. In the middle of the image, we can see fantastic sharpness and contrast levels straight from f2.8. The corners of the image are also very good indeed, although there's a hint of softness in the extreme edges. Stop the aperture down to f4 for a little improvement, and from f5.6 the lens is razor sharp from corner to corner. That's a very commendable performance indeed. Even at f22, with the lens having to deal with the effects of diffraction, we still see very good images. So, on a full frame camera, the lens gives an excellent performance with very sharp, punchy images. Let's test it on a tougher playing field of my APS-C camera with the denser pixels of its 20MP sensor. At f2.8 in the middle of the image, the lens remains very sharp indeed, which is great news. Over in the corners, sharpness is good but not great. It's about the same story at f4 and even f5.6. Good but not great sharpness levels. Stop down to f8 though, and there's a nice little boost in sharpness, and the lens remains this sharp until you stop all the way down to f22, at which point we see some real softness caused by diffraction. Not surprising. But overall, on an APS-C camera, the lens gives us no real cause for complaint. It has very good contrast, and picture quality in the middle is fantastically sharp. You have to stop down the aperture a little to get equally sharp corners, but there's no real softness to deal with. A very nice show. Let's look at distortion and vignetting on a full-frame camera. The prognosis is not great. We can definitely notice some barrel distortion there. Disappointing for a prime lens, still it's less than you would see on a zoom lens. At f2.8 the corners of the image are very dark indeed. Stop down to f4 and vignetting is still noticeable in those corners, but at f5.6 it's almost gone completely. So not such a great performance here. The lens can focus as closely as 20 cm, not bad for a wide-angle lens. Straight from f2.8, its picture quality is very sharp indeed, and stopping down to f4 yields a further, tiny improvement. Let's put the lens to work against bright lights. It's not really a great showing here. We lose a little contrast and see a bit of flaring. Not really the best performance. Finally, let's look at the quality of the lens's bokeh. Because of this lens's wide angle and only reasonably wide maximum aperture, it's not easy to get out of focus backgrounds. When you do though, those out of focus backgrounds generally look okay. There's nothing distracting about them, although they can look a little bit smudgy. It's a good enough performance for a lens of this type. Overall, there's an awful lot to like about this Canon lens. It's very small, and it has great build quality and image stabilization. It's also very sharp indeed, with no disastrous problems in the optics department. As I've said before though, its Achilles heel really is its price. Most people who are on the market for a little f2.8 prime lens are looking for something affordable. If this lens cost half the price that it does, then I would recommend it heartily, like I did with Canon's much cheaper new 24mm pancake lens for APS-C cameras. As it is though, the EF 24mm f2.8 IS USM lens is lovely and handy, and I had a good time testing it out, but it represents very poor value for money indeed. Think carefully about whether this is a wise investment.